are talking about the Artsploitation movie Blood Paradise. This is directed by Patrick von Barkenberg, who also co-wrote this and has a role in the movie. And this one stars Andréa Winter, who also co-wrote this along with Van Barkenberg. And this tells the story of a very well-to-do writer, and she has written a series of very popular novels, but now she is kind of on a bit of a sales decline, and she's had a number of kind of flops, so to speak. So her publicist advises her to take some time off, go to Sweden to kind of like recuperate and try and come up with a very commercial new book. So she goes to this very kind of rural part of Sweden, and she arrives there. She's picked up this kind of like very obsessive driver who seems to be a big fan of hers, and literally everyone she meets in this kind of very rural community seems to be some kind of weirdo or another. The driver himself, the driver's wife, who is extremely jealous, this kind of strange owner of this particular kind of house where she's kind of staying is kind of like another kind of guy who's seemingly kind of always pointing a gun at her, all sorts of kind of like weirdos. And there is actually about halfway through the movie we have a murder, and there seems to be dark intent with at least one person involved in this movie towards Andréa Winter's character. So let's talk about what works first of all. So this is kind of played, like I've said, I guess you would describe it, and I have seen it described as Artsploitation, and I guess that's a very apt kind of description, to be fair. It is kind of somewhat a comedic film to a certain degree. Both Andréa Winter and Patrick von Barkenberg play these kind of two. They're basically Von Berger plays was this woman's boyfriend, and they're both kind of like Paris Hilton types, very kind of like have had a luxury kind of background. They're kind of very much into their posh designer stuff and kind of luxury lifestyle. So when they go to this kind of rural countryside, it's very much a kind of fish out of water. There are some quite amusing scenes, particularly with the Teddy, who is the boyfriend, as he kind of turns up and has to deal with various kind of, just kind of regular farm life, I suppose. And it's kind of their reactions to that, which I think is quite funny in a lot of ways. I have to say as well, Andréa Winter, I mean, she's obviously co-wrote this movie, so she's obviously a talented woman, but she absolutely is stunningly gorgeous. She looks like a model, I have to say, but obviously, clearly, she really is a kind of a writer in real life as well. And I've got to say, does a pretty good job in the acting department as well. I actually really liked her performance here. I thought she was very, very good in the role, actually. It's kind of like, somewhat kind of aloof, but at the same time, you felt kind of, you almost thought she was vulnerable and sympathetic towards her, what I thought was she sort of struck a good balance there. So that was quite fun. I mean, there are also some fantastically beautifully shot scenes here. Obviously, this kind of Swedish countryside, and there are some really kind of beautiful kind of vistas that we kind of see on screen. And I think this is somewhat of a unique feel to it. Definitely has definitely a European flavour to it. So I think it will be kind of popular with certain niche kind of crowds. But moving on to the kind of the negatives, I will say this movie I don't think is going to be for everyone, and probably for most people, if I'm honest. The pacing of this movie is incredibly slow, and we really don't get any plot development, if we can call it that, until about halfway through the movie. It really is just this kind of woman on this kind of farm dealing with farm life, and not a lot of dialogue, if I'm honest, for the kind of the first half of this movie. So you're kind of really wondering where this kind of story is going, and when we kind of the second half comes along, and there is a sexual element to this. The very first scene of this movie, we get the impression that the type of thing she's into is a little bit like BDSM and that sort of stuff, and she's clearly kind of 50 Shades of Grey fan herself, this woman. And then we kind of go to the latter half of the film, and there are some other kind of like perverse things, shall we say, that kind of spring to mind. But yeah, I didn't really feel there was a lot to this film, if I'm honest, in regards to kind of plot. It's fairly humdrum, if we're being completely honest. It's just kind of like an arty way of doing it. And although I like Andréa Winter's performance, and I quite liked Van Barkenberg as the kind of the doofus boyfriend as well, that he was kind of funny. But I do feel some of the other kind of characters just seem a little bit... Their performance is very muted, to the fact where they're mumbling a lot of the time, I found. They're very hard to understand in occasions. Not the driver, he's kind of always shouting, but the kind of the guy who owns the house. I could barely understand him, to be honest with you. He very much mumbles his lines. And yeah, the kind of the driver as well, a little bit OTT. It's kind of fun, but a little bit OTT. So I didn't feel kind of some of the acting was the same level as our two protagonists, I suppose. But I think that was partially by design. I get the impression. You know, I gotta say, the start of the film I don't think is going to be for everyone. There's just not a lot to it, and when it's all said and done, there's not a lot of originality, if we can be completely honest. And our characters seem, I mean, it doesn't paint a good picture of Sweden. Let me put it like this: literally everyone that this woman meets in Sweden seems to be some type of kind of weird person. There's not one just regular person that she kind of meets. Everyone has some type of like weird personality quirk. So this quirk. So this is kind of like not a good advertisement for Sweden for sure. So yeah, you know, because when there's all these kind of like crazy characters, it just seems a little bit of like, I mean, it would have been better, I thought, to have some kind of more mundane characters to kind of make these guys kind of stand out a little bit more, if you want my honest opinion. But where everyone's kind of kooky, it just kind of loses some of the impact for it. Yeah, and to be honest with you, I kind of felt myself getting a little bit losing interest with this movie, because it just goes at a snail's pace, particularly the kind of the first half. Although I did like some of the elements, I liked Andrew Winter's performance, like I've said. But yeah, to be honest, it's not one I would particularly recommend, although it's a well-made film on a kind of technical level and does have some good photography, and certainly I think is, you know, a film which is made to be like this rather than kind of accidentally being like this. It's obviously meant to kind of like serve a certain audience, but that audience I don't think is a general audience for sure. So I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me comments and I shall look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.